Let's study minerals.
Don't feel right? Minerals are missing. Now, minerals are more important than vitamins. Vitamins are required for activity and processes in the body, but each vitamin requires a mineral to work because every vitamin has a mineral center.
Mendeleev discovered the periodic table because he saw by observation the effect that these different elements slash minerals had. And we have to recognize that these minerals have effects on life and biology and are needed for health.
And minerals are inorganic compounds that support life processes, so they act like mortar and bricks of our body. All body processes are dependent on minerals. And there are two classes of minerals. There's big minerals and little minerals.
So all these elements, all these minerals get together to make what we are, to make biology. And each one of them has a little tricky place where they fit in. Some don't fit in at all, but others are essential. And basically we start to understand that through the same process that allowed us to understand how matter is formed in the stars. We can start to see what is the effect of minerals on health and where they are needed.
When you're not getting enough minerals, you get sick. It's said that 80% of health conditions can be traced back to a mineral deficiency.
That's right, Dr. West. We need these minerals in order to help the facilities of metabolism, reproduction. These little minerals are key as they all have little spots. They all have little bits of helping electron transport chains, and here at the electron poisoning curve, and they all have their different effects. Ravishi saw this as he started to look at it. And if we look at the size or the weight, if a ping pong ball is hydrogen, we see iodine is like a basketball, and the heaviest material weighs like a bocce ball, 800 grams. Now we've already covered the essential nutrients of oxygen, water, carbon, nitrogen. These are the base elements, and we saw that they make up 99% of the human body. And now what we're going to do is look at other elements. We're going to look at the macro elements and the micro elements and try to understand all the elements in biology.
Minerals are overlooked. It's the missing piece in healthcare. If you don't feel right, it's almost always a mineral deficiency.
Yes, minerals are extremely important. And Dr. Ravishi taught us the law of dualism. We get the same kind of symptoms from a deficiency of a nutrient as if we get an excess. So it isn't always just taking the minerals, it's learning how to adjust and get the right amount. And nature most of the time has the answer. So now let's start to look at the next level. Let's look at some of the macro minerals. And let's start to understand what they are in the body. Because now we're going to be looking at calcium, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, sodium, chlorine, magnesium. These elements play into the master equation of life and to understand how that things are regulated. And as we look at them, we're going to see that the mineral content of the macromolecules makes up most of us. These are minerals known as inorganic minerals that build cells, stimulate chemical reactions, nerve impulses, and also allow oxygen to do its job and carbon dioxide to be transported away. Food is where we should get these minerals. We know that we really should be getting these minerals from our foods. That's the best way. The essential nutrients, minerals, vitamins, fatty acids, amino acids, to get into the body. And there are macro ones, like we talked about, and trace ones. We're going to cover the trace ones in a few minutes, but let's talk about the macro. Potassium. It helps with the nerves, muscle control. Banana and prune, carrot, that's where we get it. That's how we get that potassium. We'll talk about that more in a minute. Chlorine, also very needed for the stomach acid. We get it from table salt, but also from all the other different vegetables. Sodium, another macro unit, helps for the electrolytes and nerve impulses. There again, table salt, but also from all the other impulses. Yeah, we talked about the hydrogen, oxygen, calcium, nitrogen, the simple elements. Now the macro elements, we see that calcium and phosphorus are number 1 and 2, and they make up so much of the weight of the body, 3% of the body weight. Now what we will find is that calcium likes to be on the membrane, sodium likes to be in the serum, and potassium likes to be intracellular. Calcium sits on the membrane. It's very important for all different types of functions. It helps the electrical conductivity, potassium pump, and many other things for nerves, muscles, and all different types of reactions. Inside the body, like we see, we need calcium and phosphorus, especially when we are younger, growing, building the bones, building the different membranes as we grow. Now, once we stop growing, then we don't really need the calcium so much. And the calcium in the bones of an elderly person depends on how much calcium they got as a child. Now, healthy bones need calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, vitamin D, vitamin K. And here's some of the miracle foods that are needed to help calcium to work. To get your calcium, yogurt, sprouted seeds, nuts, beans, bone broth, grapefruit, dark green vegetables, sweet potato, figs, prune. Very, very important. Now we're going to see that calcium interacts with the catecholamines, adrenaline, norepinephrine, that the calcium is very important for the adrenergic function to help the adrenaline, epinephrine to work. And we find that calcium helps these different things to work on the adrenergic side, the sympathetic nerve system. So very important we get that. Now we also know that on the other side, there's potassium. And we need a lot of potassium in our diets. We need to get an awful lot of potassium in our diets. And the potassium is involved with the cholinergic, the acetylcholine. Not to help it develop, but to help for its utilization. That potassium and acetylcholine go hand in hand in working in the central nervous system. This is more in the parasympathetic nervous system, where we need the potassium to help the acetylcholine to work better and improve its function. When we get potassium deficient, we will have trouble with the different processes of the sympathetic nervous system. Potassium helps in so many different ways of kidney function, regulating pressure, osmotic pressure, and blood pressure. So it's very, very important. And as we learn to study the autonomic nervous system, we start to see the two different halves. And the fight-flight system, the adrenal system, needing calcium and phosphorus as its ion to help it to work. On the other side, parasympathetic for immunity, digestion, relaxation. This needs the acetylcholine, the cholinergic factors. And potassium and magnesium are needed for this function. Now, as we look at potassium and calcium, the big balance, we're going to see what we've taught you before about the energy index. Take the blood pressure, the high and the low, okay, and then add them together, and then times it by the pulse. Most medical schools don't teach you this, but I found it to be a very simple and accurate way of finding out whether there's enough calcium or potassium in the balance of the body. And this is what we do with the energy index. We're going to calculate the energy index. We must learn how to do this. Calculating the energy index. To measure the energy index, take the blood pressure and rate, 120 over 80, rate of 70, that's the perfect one. Add the systolic, the top value, 120, to the diastolic, the 80, and then you get that's 200 multiplied by the pulse rate, and the normal person should be 14,000. This is a measure of the innervation, whether they're sympathetic or parasympathetic, and you can see now, when you get a high blood pressure, say 140 over 90, 75, this is the bottom line of high blood pressure. Now you're going to get energy indexes above 17,000. You are now oversympathetic, you need potassium and stress reduction. If you have low blood pressure, 90 over 60, heart rate 53, your energy index will be below 8,000. Now you are parasympathetic, too parasympathetic. You need calcium, joy, and activity. The biggest problem we have in medicine today is where people become oversympathetic. They need potassium. They need stress reduction. and they need potassium in their diet, and they need to get these from foods, vegetables, orange vegetables. I made the bone spur powder to be able to supply a very good dose of potassium and magnesium to the people who are needing this as they start to get cardiovascular problems. It's a very excellent remedy, been using it for 30 years. Now, in order to understand this medically, if we take the serum potassium, but potassium likes to go intracellular. Sodium likes to be extracellular, it's found in the serum, so we can find serum sodium levels very accurate. Calcium likes to be on the membrane, but potassium definitely likes to be intracellular. So for us to be able to measure correctly potassium, we're going to need to measure whole blood potassium. So in order to understand potassium best, we need to take the whole blood potassium and the serum, as you see here in the graph, and now we can find out if the person is really potassium deficient, fatty acid deficient, or sterol deficient. And we start to understand more about potassium. The human body needs a whopping 4.7 grams of potassium a day. This is a massive amount. It's hard to get that from foods. But this is what we need. Now, we also should understand that the body can take potassium and make calcium if you have a spiritual purity. We talked about this in the Breatharians book, and we tried to understand more about the alchemy, that how a spiritual human body can convert those minerals. Potassium deficiency is rampant, and people need to get more foods. They also need to work on their spirituality so that their body can be more stable. Calcium is by far the greatest macro mineral needed for muscle, bone, digestive system, and we're going to get it from dairy, but also from green leafy vegetables. That's the best place. Calcitonin from the thyroid will put calcium into the bone, and parathyroid hormone will take calcium out of the bone. So there's a big balance going on. As we start to grow older, calcification starts to set in. Calcium starts to get into the cells of the vascular system, that starts to get into the cells of the skin, and people start to age as calcification builds up. Way back in 1966, I did a study on parathyroid hormone. What we did is we took 24 aging rodents. They were aging. We painted them with parathyroid hormone, brushed off a crust that developed on their skin of calcium. The parathyroid hormone would take calcium out of their skin. And lo and behold, we had young mouse afterwards. It increased their lifespan dramatically. It was amazing. And we were able to show this in many different experiments. Parathyroid hormone became very expensive after this, and people don't really look at this research. Here I am, 1966. And inside my mind, I'll tell you what, I look more like this because I've always been a hermaphrodite and both sexes. In fact, I actually did a study on sex change in certain animals. This is 1967. And here I am, 1969. And of course, inside I felt more like this. But that's a long story that doesn't really belong here. We started to understand alchemy. Now, alchemy is about hermaphroditism, etc. But we found that by giving potassium, good dose of potassium to the elderly people, we can improve their cardiovascular, we can improve their aging, we can improve the quality of their skin. We can help to stabilize the excess calcification. And this formula will actually pull calcium out of the skin and make the skin younger. So we start to understand the anti-aging effects of giving a good dose of potassium and magnesium. Phosphorus is another macro mineral that's extremely needed. And in order for us to get complete phosphorus, we're going to need to be able to get the dairy foods, meat, and the phosphorus is needed for the bones. It also is essential for the working of DNA, the conversion of the energy molecule, ATP, and all of this thing. And we need to understand that most people are not deficient in phosphorus. It's in so many different foods. So very, very rare do we find phosphorus deficiency. But then magnesium now. Magnesium is a very key mineral that's needed for the production of energy, needed for adrenal function. It's extremely well needed. And spinach, legumes, nuts, seeds, whole grains, these are very, very important that we get the amount of magnesium in the body. And sometimes we need to take extra. Stones will form in the body when we're magnesium deficient. That's one of the ways we can tell magnesium deficiency. Now we're going to move on and look at the more micro minerals. Iron will head up the list because it's needed for our blood. It's needed for the hemoglobin. Proteins, enzymes, we get that from meat and seeds. Zinc, extremely well needed. Does so many things. Enzymes. We need to really make sure we're getting enough zinc. Manganese, cofactor in many, many different enzymes. We need to make sure that we get plenty of manganese into our diet. Copper, extremely well needed for different enzyme functions, etc. Iodine, needed for the thyroid to work properly. In very, very small amounts, but it's very, very huge atom. But we need this to help regulate things. Chromium, needed for glucose and lipid metabolism. It's very, very important, and chromium will tend to make foods be dark. Molybdenum, this is also needed for enzymes, and we get it from legumes and nuts. Selenium, very needed, trace mineral for antioxidant enzymes. We get this from Brazil nuts, very, very important. Cobalt is another very needed mineral that we need to synthesize the B12 for us to be able to regulate our energy transmutation. The use of petrochemicals, pesticides, insecticides, these synthetic products around the world have so robbed the microflora in the soil and created problems so that the soil is depleted of the different minerals. The bad farming techniques without rotation, etc., have contributed to a major loss of nutrition and especially minerals, trace minerals, in the soil. These are the foods that are richest in those minerals, but we have to be careful to try to get foods that have been grown by good organic farmers who really care about mineral recycling. And of course, seaweed, different types of algae, very, very important to get some different seaweed into your body, because they will have a greater likelihood of keeping all of the different trace minerals. Put seaweed, algae, salads into your diet. If you want supplementation, there are many good full mineral supplements, including the humic and the fulvic acid variety, and a host of other different types of formulas. And I regret to say this, but I think that we all need to be able to take some type of mineral supplement. Now let's look at each of the minerals individually and see so that we understand them. Sulfur, very key element in our table that we need. We need to get onions and garlic to make sure we get that sulfide type compounds. And many people don't get enough of this, and they're sulfur deficient. They don't like the taste of the onions and the peppers. So they get fatigue, depression, degenerative disease. They get sensitivity to physiological and psychological fitness. Other foods rich in sulfur are the cruciferous vegetables, red meat, allium, the onions, garlic, eggs, walnuts, dairy products, fruits. Very, very important. We need to get the sulfur into our diet so that we can get healthy. Many people get deficient in the sulfur compounds. A good onion garlic soup can help that. Zinc deficiency. So many people are zinc deficient. Our soils are becoming deficient in nutrients, especially zinc. So we really need zinc to work and control the immune system, the reproductive system. So it's a very, very important micronutrient that is needed by the body. It has so many different functions, it's hard to even talk about all the functions that zinc does. Lithium. Lithium is a very important needed formula to help stabilize the nerves. And we find it's very rich in chamomile tea. 7-Up used to be a lithium drink, so we need to be able to recognize that. Pistachios have lithium. Boron, very, very important formula, important element that helps to control the immune system, helps to prevent and fight arthritis. Very, very rich in pistachios. Molybdenum, needed for the thyroid function. Very important. Molybdenum is needed, and we have to avoid overtaking it so that we don't get toxic. So it's very important. Manganese. The richest food in manganese is black pepper. Manganese is needed for so many things, including cartilage formation. Black pepper is the richest food. Just by seasoning, you can start to get manganese. Vanadium, tin, silicon, nickel. These are all also other essential nutrients for life. And the vanadium has been found to be helpful in healing and also helpful in liver treatment. So we have to understand that these things are all compounds that we should get from good food that has been prepared properly. Copper, very important, helps the cognitive compounds and helps so many different things and different nutrients. With the depletion of the soils, we need to get good quality soils, good quality farming techniques that are helping to make sure all the minerals are properly there. Selenium is the least abundant of the trace elements, and it's very, very important in treating many things. Chromium for blood sugar regulation, very important that we get all of these minerals. In order to get these minerals right, we need to be able to have a well-balanced, healthy diet, organic farming, people who really take farming seriously, not just for volume. Farmers who care about quality, not just quantity. Cobalt, extremely needed, etc. Fluorine is a nutrient, but in very, very small amounts it helps in teeth. We now even know that bromine is an essential nutrient for life. And what we know is we start to find out that there are certain of these nutrients that are needed to make transistors to help electrical flow. Germanium is one of them. So it's very important we get a touch of silicon, and we get a little bit of arsenic as well. And arsenic has been very helpful in treating leukemia. A tiny bit of arsenic is helpful. That could be also the hormetic effect. So let's talk about some of the hormetic compounds that we see here in red. A small dose of something in a hormetic can have stimulation effects. What a poison does in its large dose, a small amount will have the reverse effect. Strontium is needed for the bone in a very, very small amount and can be classified as a hormetic. So we have to recognize that these are elements that in small doses are stimulants, but in large doses they're poisonous. Antimony, another example of a hormetic element. And as we see that lead, cadmium, mercury, these also can have hormetic effects in very, very small doses. They can be stimulants. Then we see that silver, and we find that gold. These are also compounds that have hormetic effects. It can stimulate the immune system. So as we look at more and more of this, we start to see that here, under the ideas of negentropy, quantum biology, all of these elements are very, very important, and we need to get them from good, proper foods, organic foods, by a farmer who really cares.